So are we here to talk about some porcelain veneers today?
I think so. So welcome to another edition of the Ben and Gary Show. We know dentistry.
Yep, exactly. We know dentistry.
So yes, so today we're going to talk about porcelain veneers, indications, contraindications, what they can do for you, how they can change your smile, change your life. And so one of the first things that we'll talk about is what are porcelain veneers? And they're typically very thin shells of porcelain that are bonded to the tooth structure. And they can be formed from pressed glass, or they can be done by a ceramist where he uses a foil on the model to form the veneer. But in either way, they come out beautifully and can change the way your smile looks, and also the shape of your teeth, also the color. So those are just some of the things that we can do with porcelain veneers. And another question, Ben, is how many should we do?
Yeah, that's always a question. In fact, actually, just a patient I believe it was on Tuesday, answered that exact same question. And they were looking for an improvement on their teeth. And in fact, actually, their smile was actually pretty good. But a few chips, a little bit of wear, and the color of this individual's teeth were something that they wanted to address as well. But they just wanted their most youthful looking smile. And as the individual came to us, they had sort of, I guess, what would be looking like more like a worn set of teeth in the front. And porcelain veneers were the perfect solution for this individual. He's young enough where he still wanted to have a youthful looking smile and wanted to be able to improve it. And the effect of wear and tear on your teeth and chips certainly give you an aged looking appearance. And often patients or other people don't even really know why their face might look like there's some years on them there, and their teeth are a big function of that. So with porcelain veneers, he was looking to have that improvement, and certainly wanted to know. He was thinking about, well, my two front teeth were the ones that looked the worst, but I wanted to also blend. So you really want to usually do them in at least in pairs. It's very difficult to make one porcelain veneer look like the rest of the other teeth. So often we will do at least the two front teeth, but in fact, many times that's even more difficult to do, and that we may have to go to 6 to 8 veneers, because at any point in time where you're going to have the transition, it could show, and the transition between where the veneers end and your natural teeth then begin, that transition can make it look artificial, or that something's off or amiss. And that's obviously not what patients want to look like. They want to look as if this is their brand new smile of their own, and not have a set of or their teeth look like they were actually veneers on them. We want it to look natural. Even if there's going to be an improvement in color and making them look whiter, that's something that we want to make sure is that it's going to blend in,
right?
And that this is something that they were really honestly born with.
Right. So one thing that patients often want to do is they want to lighten the shade of their teeth. So we can do that just with veneers, but oftentimes it's better to do the bleaching procedure before the veneers are placed. So your starting shade is lighter, and the end result can be a much wider, brighter smile. And so, as Ben said, sometimes it's only necessary to do 6 veneers across the front from cuspid to cuspid. But oftentimes, the veneers, if they end at the cuspid, then the bicuspids sometimes are a little bit depressed. So to really finish the look, it's better to extend it to the first bicuspids or the second bicuspids, which are the first and second teeth behind the eye teeth. So that just makes a big difference in the end result. So patients usually are much, much happier when they do a much fuller look like that.
Yeah, that's really the ultimate. Is when you're going to be able to make it such that wherever the transition point is out of their full smile.
Right.
So everybody's a little bit different. There's a lot of individuality amongst our patients, and some people have smiles that they show all of their teeth and gums. Some patients have smiles that are very broad and they show back to their first molar teeth. So it depends on how discolored teeth may actually be to help us determine which teeth are we going to actually do and how far back. So the simple fact that they have a wide smile and they want to have a big change in color, then it usually means we're going to end up doing more teeth. And that's really pretty much to round out and complete their smile, so people cannot notice the transition between what's man-made and what you were born with.
Right. So the other thing we have to consider is the alignment of the teeth. Sometimes you have crowding, and at times it's best if there's an excessive amount of crowding, then it's best to have the teeth basically straightened out with orthodontics. There are some cases where there's minor crowding, or the teeth may be a little bit rotated, and that sometimes can be corrected with veneers, but it really has to be a case-by-case basis.
It's an interesting point you bring up, because I can tell you that there are so many patients that will ask me about getting veneers, and the reason why they're here in the office and getting the consultation is that they do have crowding, and their teeth are misaligned, and that's really referred to as a malocclusion. Veneers can give you that instant smile, but boy, do we end up doing so much more to your teeth. We have to grind down your teeth far more if they're out of alignment, and then try to do and straighten your teeth with the veneers. But honestly, that is not something I would actually do for my own mouth. It's not what I would do for my family members. Gary, you're correct. I mean, orthodontics is the first line in treatment, and sometimes that can be simply to do this through Invisalign treatment, which is a very modern way of treating a patient. There to line their teeth up, and that actually sets us up as restorative doctors to be able to give the maximum and the best look and maximum success.
Oh, right. No, I agree.
The less we have to do to the teeth to be able to put veneers on, they stay on better.
Right. So sometimes once the teeth are in alignment, patients sometimes think, well, there's nothing else that I even want to do, so we leave it at that. Yeah. And I think that's a much more conservative treatment that we can do. It's a better service, obviously, since they still have their own natural teeth.
Well, it's the right way to do it. I mean, if you were my patient, I would do it that way. I would not want to simply just arbitrarily grind down teeth.
No.
Just to be able to get the desired look, and that you'd be very satisfied in the very beginning. But as time goes on, having to reduce the teeth more, you can lead to greater sensitivity, or just that the veneers just don't stay on very well. And the more you have to reduce a tooth, the more you get into the inner part of the tooth, which we know you can't bond to. Well, you can, but it doesn't really last as long. It's not as predictable.
Right. So it is a commitment once you go down the path of porcelain veneers. They typically last 10 to 15 years, sometimes longer. It depends on
take care of them.
How well they take care of it. So at that point, they would have to be redone or replaced, and you really have to be able to know what you're doing to do that over again. So it's much easier to do it the first time than it is to do it the second time.
To bring up another good point about, you said, well, how many teeth do we actually do? Well, another question I just recently got was, the patient came in very knowledgeable and knew that they wanted to do something to their teeth, whether it's some sort of veneer, and they said, well, I'm not quite sure if I want porcelain veneers or composite veneers. And I said, that's a great question, because they both can get you to the same endpoint. And the difference between the two with composite or bonding is that it's done directly on your teeth and on a patient's teeth, versus porcelain veneer, two-step process. There's an initial appointment of being able to do some minor adjustments and filing to the enamel, and then the patient will walk away with interim or temporary veneers. And about 2 weeks later, then we were able to swap the interim veneers out for the porcelain veneers. So it's a bit of a longer process. I think the difference that patients will notice in them is longevity. With composite, it's probably not going to stay and last as long and remain in the ideal state, versus a porcelain veneer. If there's no chipping, it's really not going to change in 10 to 15 years. So they're going to certainly be more durable.
Right. Oh yeah.
But when you need to repair a veneer, it's a replacement typically. Versus with composite, it's far easier to be able to repair that one directly in small sections, small areas. So it's great for younger patients, the ones who I get from the pediatric dentist, who are still very young, and that you just don't want to start doing irreversible procedures to patients who are in their teens, because everything that you make is going to have to be replaced. Anything man-made is going to have to be redone.
Right.
So
and the other aspect with composites is the finish. It loses its luster, if you will, over time. It just looks a little bit duller as far as the surface finish. And the other thing is that it will pick up stain over time. So the shade is not as stable as with the porcelain veneers. It tends to change with time as it picks up different stains. So, and you can usually see the staining along the margins where the composite ends, and that's what we call the margin, of course. And so you'll typically see stain collect there. So those are some of the little drawbacks with composite or direct bonding.
Yeah, and like anything else in life, it's all operator or I should say, maybe the word is that each individual has their own skill level,
Right.
and I'd say that it requires far more skill to be able to directly build and design a smile in composite directly on the teeth than there is an individual who's going to be using porcelain veneers.
Right.
I believe that having the support of over that 2-week period of the laboratory support allows us to be able to take our time remotely
Right.
to idealize each individual tooth,
Right.
versus we only have but so much time when an individual's in the chair.
Oh, yeah.
You may only have a couple of hours, tops to be able to do that.
Right.
So you sort of get what you get afterwards. You can always come back and do more, but it's just far more demanding on a dentist to do it directly with bonding versus porcelain veneers.
Right.
It's far easier to achieve the desired look in the end. It's going to be more expensive to go that route because there's certainly another individual involved, a laboratory technician. There are 2 appointments. There's time and chair time involved in doing porcelain veneers versus bonding. But I think technically, trying to do composite veneers is just far more difficult and demanding on the dentist in the process.
It is, but I will say that the composites have improved exponentially over time, and so now we have composites that have different opacities, different translucencies, and if we have to do or composite veneers, we can make them look much more lifelike or more natural than we used to, just because the materials were so much better.
Yeah, I think we only had in the beginning maybe about 6 to 8 shades.
Yeah,
and now there's seeming like a Crayola box full of shades that we have to choose from.
It's a little bit more fun to play with.
Yeah, it's certainly more sophisticated in the process.
Yeah, it is. So.
Would you say porcelain veneers are some of your favorite procedures to do?
I would. I love doing veneers. I think they change the person's personality, their self-esteem, and their self-confidence to a much greater level than doing a filling or a crown in the back. So it's a much more of a life-changing event procedure than anything else that we do, except for when we do anterior crowns. Of course, that's another thing that makes a big difference in a patient's personality.
Which we'll bring up one other day when we have another podcast.
Right,
That's a whole another avenue to be able to talk about here.
Right.
But you also bring up another point that reminds me, or it comes to light, when you talked about what we can do about changing a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say porcelain veneers are one of the few procedures that we do that really can change a person's life in a short period of time.
Right.
And whether it be composite or porcelain veneers, hands down, they're never really more satisfied individual than somebody who's gotten their veneers. And that's really speaks to why we do this.
Right. Well, I mean, we've had patients cry when they take a look at the veneers. So it's a neat experience for us as well as the patient.
It's extremely fulfilling, and it really kind of speaks to the reason why we became dentists in the first place, which is to affect and change people's lives for a positive endpoint. And it's almost like with veneers, there's very little delayed gratification because it happens so quickly. And many other times when we do the much different, more complicated cases, it just takes a protracted amount of time to be able to get there. And so it takes some patience for the patient to be able to get to that point. Versus veneers, it's kind of an instant bang of success, and they really are walking away with feeling very very much better about themselves.
Oh yes, definitely. But in order to get to that end point, there's a lot of communication that we have to have with the patient to know what their end point is. I mean, we let them guide us to that endpoint. So it's important for them to come in with ideas and to be able to verbalize those expectations.
It's difficult to be able to articulate and visualize what the endpoint is going to look like, and that's where sort of the digital mock-ups of patients, which is why we take pictures and invest in expensive cameras to be able to get high definition pictures that are close up that we can use to show a potential before and after for a patient. And simply just with manipulating the photos, we can give them a sense of what it would look like, and it's fun to be able to do it for them because then they can tangibly sort of understand a bit better like what it's going to be like, and they can kind of make up their mind. This is where we can kind of show them why we thought maybe we could do this in 4 or 6 or 8 veneers or 10. It depends on which one it would be. And this is truly how we can customize it for the individual.
Right. That's the importance of communication. I don't know. I kind of like to have a hard model that's been waxed up, and patients like to kind of feel things too.
Sure. Well, that's also maybe the second step, but if someone doesn't necessarily want to get to that point, but it takes time to go through that as well, time and expense versus taking a digital photograph and manipulating it and then showing it to them to get a sense of how they want this to look.
No.
And I think what we're trying to always do is to gauge person's expectations,
Right.
and we want them to be able to. We want to better understand what their expectations are. It's nothing worse than unmet expectation, because that usually leads to some level of upset. So it's better to be able to help understand, or better for us to understand that in advance. And so digital mock-ups,
Right.
and then an actual physical mock-up, and then sometimes that allows us to even take that same mock-up and actually press it on a patient's teeth so that they can visualize it in the mirror and get a sense of what it will do for them. And really, what does that mean? That means that the patients will come to us because they want a certain effect. And it's important for us to know what that effect is, because that's what's driving them in the first place. So if we miss that, then we have a potential that we can have an unhappy or a less than successful end result. Hey, listen, we're here in the business to be as specialists to be able to know exactly what the patient wants and be able to deliver on that.
Oh, yeah.
And if we don't spend the time up in advance of, then it's pretty much just luck if we're going to get there. And we're not into trying to. Luck is great to have, but we're not relying on luck.
Yeah. Well, preparation is 90% of what we do, and 10% of what we do in the clinic, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
yeah, porcelain veneers have been a great advancement.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, you talked about a couple of things there in terms of how are they actually fabricated. You know, there's
Oh, yeah.
traditionally, there's a lot of done by hand, where they go from a liquid and a powder, and they mix it together and they shape it and put it into an oven, and
Right.
you go through several steps of layering the porcelain to really build it from nothing into something. And there's a wonderfully aesthetic, more current and modern ways are to be able to do this digitally, where they're digitally mocking them up, and then through CAD technology, and then milling afterwards out of almost like Michelangelo out of a block of nothing. They are able to mill out the veneers. And however, those might be very durable. They might be the newest and latest thing. But I have to say that if you're an individual who might have a challenging color, or we're really trying to be ideal in our matching, that is the new way, but it's also maybe a harder way, to be able to match in for a patient.
well, that's why we have an on-site lab and let Rick do his magic. So.
Yeah, that's why we kind of able to set ourselves apart, is having our own lab on premise.
Yeah.
And trying to do it the more traditional way. We have both ways at our fingertips to be able to do it.
Right.
But I think that without having our own lab on premise, we would not be able to determine. We would probably pigeonhole into one particular way of doing it.
Right.
And if you're sending things off remotely, you're not able to kind of give the nuances that are necessary to be able to give a customized smile. So it's having knowledge and having that in our office is a bit of like Shangri-La.
I feel spoiled.
Yeah, extremely spoiled.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful way to practice. So.
Anything else to conclude at this point in time?
Gosh,
I think that
I'm at a loss for words. What happened?
well, I think there's so many things to talk about, but I think we'll leave it at that today, and come back another day for another episode of the Ben and Gary Show. We know dentistry.